A Russian court has found that the deceased lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, is guilty of tax evasion. The posthumous trial has led to widespread criticism in the West. And joining me now to talk about it is Neil Buckley, our Eastern Europe editor. Neil, could you just start, please, by giving us a brief background to this case?
Yes, this has become a rather celebrated case. Sergei Magnitsky was a corporate lawyer who was investigating an alleged fraud involving a company called Hermitage Capital, which used to be the largest portfolio investor in Russia. The founder of Hermitage Capital, a guy called Bill Browder, was excluded from Russia for reasons we don't entirely understand. And then the shell of the company was allegedly used by Russian tax officials to perpetrate a fraud which involved them essentially receiving $230 million fraudulently from the Russian state. Magnitsky was investigating this. He himself was then arrested. And while he was in jail, he died, allegedly of being beaten to death. And a Presidential Human Rights Commission in Russia did say that there was good evidence to suggest that he died from being beaten to death. But very little has happened to the alleged perpetrators either of this fraud or the killing of Magnitsky. And in a sense, to sort of add insult to injury, Russia then put Magnitsky on trial posthumously, which is a very rare thing legally, for tax evasion himself, and now they've found Magnitsky guilty. So this is an attempt to try and show that Magnitsky was a bad guy, but I think no one in the West is going to believe that this is in any way proof that Magnitsky was a bad guy.
And given all of that, what further damage do you think this verdict could do in the West? What further damage could it do to Mr. Putin's reputation?
Well, I think Mr. Putin's reputation has taken quite a knock over the last year since he returned for his third term as president. You'll remember that there were protests after the parliamentary elections in Russia in 2011. Mr. Putin came back as president a few months later, and since then he has really taken a lot of measures, or ensured that the Russian government has taken a lot of measures against people who are involved in the protests, against non-governmental organizations, and that has involved in very questionable legal cases being brought against protesters and so on. And the fact that we've now had this rather frankly bizarre posthumous conviction of Sergei Magnitsky just adds to the general impression in the West that things are not going the way we would like to see them go in Russia, and that it's becoming a more repressive but also more arbitrary system in the way that it treats opponents.
And what's next? How do you expect the West to respond? Do you think more countries are likely to try and put pressure on Russia over this?
Well, we've had an example already in the US. The US Congress adopted at the end of last year the Magnitsky Act, which is a piece of legislation barring Russians allegedly involved in the fraud or in the death of Magnitsky from entering the US and freezing their assets there. And there has been pressure for similar laws to be adopted in Europe. I think we're going to see that pressure increase. It's something the European Union might consider at the EU level, something similar. It's something that we may see individual European countries look at doing. And of course, if any member of the Schengen zone, the passport-free area within Europe, were to adopt these measures, they would apply automatically across the whole Schengen zone anyway. So I think that's the most likely immediate response to this. But overall, it's going to increase the international pressure on Russia, on human rights, on the rule of law, on its legal system.
Neil Buckley, thank you very much.
Thank you.